February 13th, 1950. The dawn of the Cold War. Off the west coast of Canada, U.S. Air Force bomber 075 is on a top-secret mission. Deep inside the bomb bay, weaponeer Ted Schreier is arming a Mark IV nuclear weapon when the mission goes terribly wrong.
Captain, we got a fire on one. Shut down submarine number one. Number two's on fire. There's a 4-foot flame coming out of that thing. Shut down engine number two. Roger. Shutting down two.
Without warning, 2 of its 6 engines erupt in flames. Inside the bomb bay, weaponeer Schreier struggles to safe the weapon as the B-36 begins to plummet from the sky. Moments later, the bomber suffers a crippling blow as a 3rd engine is engulfed in flames.
We have 3 engines out.
As 075 enters restricted airspace over Canada, the pilot orders his crew of 16 to prepare to abandon the crippled bomber.
Crew 17, fires on engines 1, 3, and 5. Ditching. Look for survivors of wreckage near Princess Royal Island.
Just before midnight, the nuclear bomber disappears from the radar screen. Minutes later, the Pentagon receives the code word that a nuclear bomb has been lost. 3 days later, most of the crew are rescued from Princess Royal Island on British Columbia's west coast. Among 5 crewmen never found is the man responsible for the bomb's safekeeping, weaponeer Ted Schreier. Official U.S. Air Force reports claim the bomber and her nuclear weapon are lost at sea. Now, more than half a century later, a leviathan of the Cold War emerges from the ice.
The size of the debris field is just incredible. This is the center of where the plane was destroyed.
High up in the mountains of northern British Columbia, a Canadian expedition team travels to the remote crash site of one of the U.S. military's most closely guarded secrets.
What do you got?
Listen, airplane 92075.
The flight of 075 is the world's first broken arrow incident. We are seeing the first page of atomic weapons history being written at this moment.
This is a story I've spent so much time on. There's no turning back. I want to find the truth. I want to find out what happened that night when 075 went down.
Was bomber 075's Mark IV bomb armed for a nuclear detonation?
Some secrets were meant never to be told. I don't think the mystery of 075 is one of them.
For centuries, the native people of northern British Columbia have referred to the Kispiox Mountains as the hidden place. Here, concealed among rock and ice, is one of the most evocative stories of the Cold War. The final resting place of nuclear bomber 075, America's first broken arrow. It's a hostile world where high winds and unpredictable weather can roll in without warning. The story of bomber 075 and its lost bomb exists on the border of myth and reality. More than 50 years later, the U.S. Air Force refuses to comment about the incident. Survivors offer little about their 1950 top-secret mission or the campaign of secrecy that would follow.
You don't want to make it possible for somebody that wanted to do damage to the country to maybe have some information that they could use. It's just better not to talk about things like that.
Well, there's still things that I can't talk about, that I won't talk about.
They do not destroy the birdcage. They do not destroy...
3 men have spent years trying to unravel the mystery. They're convinced the bomber's Mark IV was armed with a deadly plutonium core. Each is determined to uncover what happened to the nuclear material and have joined forces in the hope of solving one of the U.S. military's darkest secrets.
There should be bone fragments.
When the Pentagon releases its first report on the incident in the late 1970s, aviation writer Dirk Scepter is one of the first to read it.
The U.S. military are still withholding a number of pages to be released, or maybe never to be released.
The core was a ball of plutonium or uranium or the site so far.
Dr. John Clearwater is a Cold War historian and a leading nuclear weapons expert.
Safe in terms of radiation.
Assuming that a pilot did fly the plane there.
Jim Laird is the group's B-36 expert. For Laird and the rest of the team, the mystery of what happened on 075 has become an obsession.
This mystery really begins at the moment where the men got the signal to bail out over Princess Royal Island in the middle of the night.
What is known from Air Force documents is that before the crew parachuted from the disabled aircraft, the autopilot was set to fly the empty bomber further out to sea. But mysteriously, 075 crashed high in the mountains north of Smithers, BC, more than 200 miles in the opposite direction of its last known heading. When the bomber was found, the U.S. Air Force immediately commandeered a hangar at the Smithers Airport to stage a covert mission to the wreck site. Shrouded in secrecy, the 1954 Air Force expedition includes a three-man special operations team, led by a local guide. Supplies, including a large quantity of explosives and a Geiger counter, are dropped near the crash site. On the third day, with bad weather setting in, the team retreats to a safe location and destroys the fallen bomber.
This was the first time, and as far as I know, the only time, the U.S. Air Force went in to a crash site of one of their aircraft and destroyed it. Why? What were they trying to hide?
The mystery of 075 has lasted longer than the Cold War itself, and the team has little to go on. What they do know is that a Mark IV bomb was on board the aircraft. Photographs taken of the wreckage by the Canadian military in the late 1990s also revealed detonators needed for exploding a nuclear device. But the most significant evidence is the birdcage, a lead-lined container specifically used to carry the bomb's deadly plutonium core. For the team, they are facts that suggest the bomb was armed for a nuclear detonation. What happened during the world's first Broken Arrow incident? Was the Mark IV armed for a nuclear detonation before it crashed? Or did someone try to fly the aircraft and its atomic bomb to safety? Uncovering the truth won't be easy. And although the team may not agree about what happened to 075 and its lost nuke, they agree there is only one way to find out. Far from civilization and accessible only by helicopter, the trip to the remote site of the first Broken Arrow isn't an easy one.
There it is. There's a motor up on the hill there.
Strewn among ice and jagged rocks, the remains of 075 is a garden of twisted steel.
Hey, Dirk, I think I found a couple of the cylinder heads here. They look like they've gone through intense heat.
From their research, they believe 075 landed nearly intact before being blown up by the Air Force Special Operations Team in 1954.
The size of the debris field is just incredible. You look up on the hill there, and there's a propeller up on the hill, and it's so far away from us.
More than 100 meters from the bomber's impact site, they find their first clue.
These big parts, heavy parts, are way down the crash site. To blow an engine this size apart, they must have used mega explosives in '54.
The team is puzzled by the degree of devastation and wonder why the Air Force destroyed an aircraft lost in such a desolate place.
It looks to me as though the entire aircraft has been rolled, or when the detonations took place, it flipped the entire section on its back.
Might be just this section, this aft section of the fuselage that flipped over.
It's upside down. The whole plane looks to be upside down.
Although the destruction of the bomber would have required large quantities of TNT, there is no end to the amount of unused explosives scattered around the wreckage.
Were the explosions in 1954 so massive as to throw a massive aircraft onto its back? I don't know what happened here. I think we're in a bit of luck, Jim. Right under here, there's the original painting, number 6, on the forward part of the nacelle here.
This would have been the extreme outboard engine on the right-hand side of the aircraft.
Which was running.
Yes, it was, and it's now almost in the bomb bay. So how did it get here?
This is the co-pilot's position here in the cockpit.
075's compass is the only piece of equipment still recognizable from the flight deck. But behind the cockpit, they find a clue that only deepens the mystery.
And it does look to me like there's a hole here, like a big explosion took place in this spot. But what kind of explosion?
In their search for the answers, the expedition will have only 3 days to investigate the shattered remains of the largest bomber ever built.